Morning. What I'd like to do now is introduce our guest from Norfolk, Nebraska, very talented chiropractor with a large following due to her outstanding results, particularly with pediatric chiropractic. Being a second-generation chiropractor, she's well familiar and versed with healthy living and lifestyle choices. And it's a great pleasure to have you with us today, Dr. Kim Thor.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Just for our listeners, can you give just a little more background about yourself? You mentioned you have a husband that shaves his head too.
I do. I have a husband who shaves his head too. That's funny. We'll start with that. So yeah, I'm a mother of two. They are 7 and 4. I'm never bored. I am married. We've known each other almost 10 years now, which is crazy. I graduated from Palmer College of Chiropractic 10 years ago, right before I met the husband. I'm from Norfolk, Nebraska. I went away to college, thought I'd never come back to small town Norfolk, Nebraska, and here I am. It's a great place to raise my children, and people here in my community really understand what health means more and more with time, and I love that. I adjust all shapes and sizes of people, but the little ones are my favorite. They don't hurt my shoulder when I rock their bones because you don't have to punch them very hard. But it just changes my soul, fulfills my soul to see a change of a life in something so little. Because if you take a road of what you did versus what would have happened if you didn't, it's most likely different. And I like to think that that just sets them on a good pathway. I grew up getting adjusted like from before I can remember, like it was a common thing you did. It was just part of a lifestyle. Like we weren't scared of disease, You say the word chicken pox. I remember getting a Barbie. There wasn't like, chicken pox, but that's just how we grew up. We would play outside. We would eat the dirt without eating the dirt, but you know what I mean? Build the immune system naturally. I don't remember going to the doctor except for like physicals when we would get exemptions from vaccines because we didn't do that. And it's just different than society as a whole, which makes me feel like a unique cat. So I just wear that hat,
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
You bring up some really good points, especially in the relevance of things. I'd like to address a few things that are currently going on and get your expert opinion on it. And you already brought it up. Does our society have a fear of illness or disease? And
yes,
it seems to be far-fetched, right?
Yes, they do. Like you drive by pharmacies, you drive by grocery stores, you drive by fast food places, and there's get your flu shot, get your shots. You watch the television, which I don't, but some people do. And there's commercials saying you need this pill and get vaccines. And you have to say it, eat it, smell it, whatever, 8 times for it to be ingrained in your brain, they say. So if you're seeing that all the time, you're going to think that that's what you should do. And if your parents did that and your siblings did that and your grandparents did that, like if your parents didn't breastfeed, you might think it's weird. If your parents did breastfeed, they might think it's weird if you don't. So however you grew up, whatever you're used to, that becomes common, and then that becomes normal. And what's normal and common and popular doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing. But I think because of the fear of the disease, because of the lack of education, because of the confidence in natural health, and because of just misinformation, society just goes with the majority.
Yeah. And I tell you what, when it comes to all the cues and all the signs you see, in the fast food restaurants, offering a free, whatever it might be, an ice cream cone or something if you get a flu shot. I mean, there's literally $38 billion a year spent convincing people that drugs and surgery are the way. And ultimately, this has led to, some pretty disturbing findings. You can just Google this and you'll see that our current medical system is now the 3rd leading cause of death in America. And it's just really sad, especially what we spend on it and everything else. And I do have a background of working in a hospital, so I've seen some pretty bizarre things they do, and they have the whole sticker name of healthcare behind it. And it's complete opposite of that. So it's kind of refreshing to hear like-minded thoughts coming out, because we definitely need to get some accountability for what's going on today, and really to look at where we're going and think about, our children and our grandchildren, potentially what are we leaving for them behind?
Yeah.
And some of the studies right now are, by the time it's 2035, that's 15 years from now, we're looking at, 1 out of 3 with autism, 70% of the population having cancer. And, in 1975, it was 1 in 5,000 children with autism. Now in 2015, 4 years ago, we're at 1 in 36. So I imagined it's declined even since. And we really should start getting back to our roots and getting back to what's natural and getting back to what our body, our body has this incredible ability to heal on its own, and we need to really maximize those efforts.
Yeah, like we were and beautifully and wonderfully made with an immune system, with a nervous system, with an ability for our body to create antibodies to disease, to then have stronger fighters when you encounter disease again. And the things you mentioned, we're not, as a country, on the road to increasingly good health. If you take the stats you just said, like, you're on the road to not so good health compared to what it was in the past. And even if you look at the United States compared to other countries, and other countries make other choices and choose to use their billions of dollars for marketing in different directions sometimes, and they have a better health rating than the United States, which is pretty sad, because if health is the goal and you have that amount of billions, you would almost want to get on the road to health with time.
Yeah, and that's another important thing, is maybe even deeper than the health, is the economic consequences, because there's not an economic structure on the planet that can handle this level of chronic illness where we're headed. So it's even beyond the health, it's ultimately the survival of our country is dependent on this. So how much of this fear that we're talking about do you think is falsely generated?
I'm not scared of disease at all. I mean, I know that by going to the chiropractor, my brain and my body can communicate better. My immune system can then have the best chance at fighting disease. I welcome a fever when it's warranted. I welcome eating the dirt. I welcome breathing in the air, when there's not chemicals in it. But I'm not scared of it at all. I have confidence in natural health. I have confidence in chiropractic. The things I chose for myself when I could, as a teenager, as a college student, the things that were chosen for me when I was a child, the things that I choose for my children. I mean, if I didn't think it was the right choice, I wouldn't choose it for my children, and I do. And a lot of times I speak to other chiropractors and they choose that too. When you have a sound philosophy and a sound confidence in a chiropractic adjustment and in natural health, because the fear, if you just break it down, when you're scared of something, stress hormones are released. Stress hormones block in sorts your ability to fight that disease. They don't give you a better chance at fighting it. They give you a worse chance at fighting it, because you're then stressed. So that right there makes you more susceptible to the disease. And my next question when people are scared is, what are you scared of? I mean, if you have been feeding your immune system, if you've been resting your body so it can heal, if you've been well adjusted, if you've chosen natural health choices to not decrease your ability to then fight disease, and if you don't have an autoimmune disease and you can fight disease well, why is there fear? I mean, people encounter disease every day. People encounter disease all the time. You can get a disease, process it, have antibodies, and not even know you were sick sometimes. But how do I want to say this? If you have a fear that because other people have it and because there's a stigma that you should have it, it's hard to break that down once it exists, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of brought it up a little bit with your children and the way you were raised and everything. What inspired you to focus on pediatrics more? I know you adjust everyone of all size, but I see that the kids are your favorite, and you seem to really have a gift for that. What really inspired you to look into adjusting children more?
Well, I was adjusted at a young age. So for me, in my head, ingrained in my subconscious, there was never oh, this is the age you should be to get adjusted. It was just, you're born with a spine. Let's take care of it, So it was never ruled out that there would be children in my practice. Now, there's a large percentage of children in my practice compared to adults, probably because I love it. Like in the first 2 weeks of practice, when I saw a little tiny baby come in, there was a hesitation versus now it's just like, oh, let's go do this. But the more and more you do it, the results to me were just like night and day. And the kid can't say, I feel better. But the kid sometimes has a dazed look on their face like, oh, I'm calm. Or like you get the mother that's like, Mom, Kim, I was freaking out because my kid slept all night long and I thought something was wrong, when really they're just healing. Or they weren't able to poop and then they pooped because you're physically getting the toxins out. And when you change a life that early, it just did something to me, like made me want to go help more people. Because if every kid on this planet was adjusted as soon as possible after birth, I think this country would be better on that road to health. And given that it made a physical, emotional response, filled up my bucket, if you will. And not that adults don't fill up my bucket, don't get me wrong. But when you change the life of a child that little, you then change the life of the mother, the parents, the whole household, and word kind of spreads faster. So the more I saw the kids, the more the community talked that I saw the kids, and that's kind of just what it became, really.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, really something to touch those lives early and to, get the children on the right path early, because I'll tell you what, they deep down inside them, they don't want drugs. So it's essentially what the parent's going to offer them. And if you can offer them a choice of doing something natural and safe and effective, then you can absolutely put a ripple in the trajectory of their life where they're heading. And that's very crucial. So
yeah, I laugh at your word choice, natural, safe, and effective. I mean, that safe and effective, that's another phrase right there that's kind of ingrained in people's brains, whether it's medical doctors in med school or the slogan of choose this, it's safe and effective, when really the word natural is the most important part of that sentence, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially you can tell chiropractic's safe when you just look at for instance, the malpractice insurance. I mean, it doesn't lie. There's no doubt about that. When your average physician today pays well over $100,000 a year for malpractice insurance, again, it has to lead to that third leading cause of death. Okay. And traditional chiropractic malpractice insurance is, $1,000 a year, maybe if that. So again, the insurance companies do the investigations. We might not, I don't work with insurance, and I know you don't either. And we don't align. Yeah. We don't align with their values and their purpose.
Correct.
But we can also say that they're not real foolish when it comes to things, because they play the system and they investigate things, and they have, great invested interest in this. And so they can tell who really hurts people and who doesn't long term. And chiropractic notoriously has been found to be very effective for people. So
have you always not taken insurance, or did you used to, or how did that happen, if you don't mind me asking you?
Not at all. Ask anything. No, I do a lot of functional medicine. So no, I've never worked with insurance. I will say, when I first got into practice, I worked with Medicare. That's the only one. And I did some pretty cool muscle work, and I did some pretty cool nutritional things. And there was a couple of ladies that I worked with and actually got these women walking again when they couldn't walk very well. And I just remember at one point Medicare denied everything, and I literally lost thousands. And I thought, what's the point of working for someone else when you're really passionate? And that's what I'm convinced today. There's insurance chiropractic, and then there's real chiropractic.
Oh, I love you, Gabe Roberts.
I figured you'd really like that, because we're able to do what we need to do. We don't have handcuffs, People come people come into us and I'm a best practitioner. I'm also well into nutrition and well into the whole fight or flight, rest and digest thing. And I was a Marine for 8 years, so I know a big deal about the sympathetics. I have had pretty traumatic childhood, even before the Marines. So it's safe to say that I've been on that high-end scale of the sympathetic my entire life. And there was one point whenever I did get sick, and I went through 30 doctors in a year roughly. I spent a small fortune, and the last guy that helped me out was a best practitioner. And within a few treatments, he had my sympathetics calm down, and it made me absolutely become obsessed with this world. And so when people come to me, they've already been to on an average of 12 doctors before they even come in.
Wow.
So we
Crazy.
sit down. Yeah, so we sit down with them and try to figure out what they're deficient in. Usually it's some kind of nature. We try to get people to love themselves a little more. And when they actually learn to love themselves, it's real easy for them to make the right choice. They're going to eat better food. They're going to choose better relationships, and they're going to not spend time on things that don't serve them, like watching, foolish media or whatever else it might be that's just a big distraction, So it's pretty exciting. But being able to help people in the ways they need,
Yes.
versus doing what the insurance is going to pay for, is a tremendous value. And I've never seen anyone ever get better with insurance. It's actually quite the opposite. I live in Leawood, Kansas, and this is a more wealthy part of Kansas. And I've seen over the years many teenagers that their parents are employed by big companies or something, and they have great insurance. And what I'm convinced of is that the better insurance you have, the sicker you're going to get.
Wow.
Every time. Just watch, because when you have great insurance, you get more procedures done. And when you get more procedures done, none of that is allowing you to live your life better. None of that's looking at getting and seeing the doctor less, or less appointments, or less procedures, or less testing, or any of that.
Interventions. Yeah.
It's more and more and more. If you got great insurance, great. There's going to be more and more and more things to do. And again, going back to that fact that our medical system is now the third leading cause of death. Now, I do want to emphasize that I think our Western medicine does fantastic for acute trauma. You get in a car accident, if you're, cleaning leaves off your trough or something in the spring and you fall off the roof, you snap a leg, don't run into your office, don't run into my office. Go to the hospital, let them put you back together, and then come see us, because that's where the real healing takes place. Healing does not take place in a hospital at all. It does not, just the opposite. So, and again, I can say that because the Lancet, I think it was 1998, that's the most prestige journal on the planet, said itself, hospitals are more dangerous than working in factories and minefields. Whenever the Lancet says that, you really got to think, do I want to spend time in the hospital? So we're on the same path of knowing we are free to do what we need to do to get the person better, and they're hiring us. So instead of hiring someone else that's not even watching what's going on, and insurance companies, although they might investigate things, they don't have a clue what health is. So
Do they care if they knew? Exactly.
No.
Right.
So back to this child's adjusting and everything. What's the importance of a child's first adjustment?
Oh, well, that's a question, isn't it? I would say it's essential to them living their best life. I mean, even if your kid has no symptoms, if they sleep well, they poop every day, they're happy and calm, they focus well in school, they run symmetrically, like even if there's no yellow flag, red flag for you to be like, oh, they need a chiropractor, you don't know how good a nervous system can communicate until it's communicating at its best. So if you take 100% as the optimal goal, if a baby or a person or a spine is subluxated even a tiny millimeter and you're functioning at 99%, 99 is not 100. So when the brain and the body can communicate through the nervous system, when the bones are aligned and there's no subluxation present, then that system, that human, can function at its optimal potential. They They most likely do the best in school. They most likely kick disease the best they can. They most likely get the best sleep that they can. They most likely digest the best they can. They're most likely as happy and calm as they can be. Now, every system's different. So if your optimum that you can reach is only, say, 96 because of other factors, then it is what it is. But to get a system as good as you can get it, you don't know that potential until you've tried it. A lot of times people will come in and call it colic. And I hate calling things because to me, disease, comes from the outside, if you will, but it's affecting the body because of the body's inability to adapt or process or fight it. Because if we're strong inside, we have a better shield against disease. You know what I mean? So if you get your child aligned, if you get them with the best shield, the best communication, the best function, the best chance at healing possible, then there shouldn't be fear of disease, and they should be able to live their best life. And a lot of people come in with colic. They call it colic because, like a time bomb, sometimes the baby just starts screaming at the same time every night, which is ridiculous to me. Like, my kids scream for 5 seconds. I'm like, oh, baby, what do you need? It's okay. Like, I never really experienced that. And sometimes mothers say that their baby screams for 20 of 24 hours a day. Like, so those are obviously reasons that your baby's unhappy. You can tell something has to be done. My vote, take him to the chiropractor, right? But like, say they are a little crabby, or say they aren't on the honor roll, or say they, don't do well with certain types of foods, or say they don't turn their head super awesome one way versus the other to breastfeed. Like, to me, those are red flags. Go to the chiropractor. But to society, if you're not educated and you don't know when to take your baby, take them before there's a flag that exists, because you might not even know what good is until you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some other signs and symptoms that you might see that a child will show that should alert parents that chiropractic intervention is definitely needed? And I think you mentioned a couple, that turning to the right, left, but what are some other obvious signs that parents need to watch out for?
Sure. Well, step one, has your baby been born? Most likely the answer is yes. That is a reason to take your baby to the chiropractor. Whether the birth is smooth, whether it's not smooth, whether it's C-section, whether it's vaginal, whether it's forceps, whether it's a vacuum, whether it's any reason, they were smashed in a pool of water in your belly, and at the end of it, smashed more than at the beginning of it. And then they were pulled out of you like a watermelon through a garden hose, or cut out of you, and who knows how the head goes while they do that. That is a main, huge, giant reason to take your baby to the chiropractor. Now, the youngest I've ever adjusted is 4 hours old. Some people come on their way home from the hospital. Some people wait a couple weeks because that's what they feel comfortable with. But before you see a symptom, before you see a sign, birth is a reason to take your baby to the chiropractor. Now, if you're not convinced that that's reason enough, if your baby starts to get a flat head, if your baby's not crawling when they should be, if your baby's not sleeping 3, 4, 5 hours a night when they're a few months old at a time, if your baby's having ear issues, if the ear's unable to drain, if the sinuses are unable to drain, if the baby doesn't poop every day, if the baby gets fevers for an unexplainable reason, if the baby has spit up, if the baby has projectile spit up, if the baby can't turn its head to breastfeed both sides. There's so many reasons. And to me, I don't like listing the reasons because I don't treat those reasons. I treat the baby, and the body heals if it can heal. So birth would be like the overall reason why you should. Now, kids play sports. Kids fall when they're learning to crawl. Kids fall when they're learning to walk. Bumps and bruises make them need a chiropractor. Chemical stress. If you're feeding them Pepsi and Doritos after school, it's probably not as good as a choice as other things, and sometimes that can affect the body. If there's stress in the household, that's a reason. If they're not doing great in school, like sometimes if a child doesn't behave well in school, they will call it ADD, when sometimes you can take that kid to the chiropractor, get their brain and body communicating better, and then there's nothing to term because the body can then heal. But it's so easy for our society to just stick them on a pill because it's faster and it's quicker and it's easier. But for me, these are all reasons you should take your baby to a chiropractor. But more importantly, you should take them to be assessed prior to any issue.
Yeah. I love it.
Great.
You see, you work on a lot of kids' atlases. You think
You
that's
know,
part?
there's another thing that drives me crazy. Not every kid brings you the same bone out of place. So I work on a lot of kids' spines. A lot of times I find it's a pelvis and an upper cervical that work against each other. There's a sacro-occipital technique of sorts. But when they're tiny, 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 they don't have a whole lot of muscle. They have a suck, they have a squeeze, and they have a let's roll over with my strong side of the body usually. So like probably C2, C1 in the skull, something in there, most likely combined with a pelvis some way or another is what I find typically. Now, I can't say I mostly adjust kids' atlases or kids' occipits because every kid's different.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember I did watch an interview of you once, and you talked about a new little baby, and you were working on the atlas, and it just let out this big breath, you know, and looked right up at you like, oh, you know, and I see in my profession, you know, all sorts of different things, pelvic and this and that. In my opinion, in my professional opinion, I would say the atlas is probably the most dangerous one. But anywhere that there's a mechanical issue, it's going to cause peripheral problems later on, you know, and sometimes there can be peripheral problems, feet, hands, and this all has a spinal origin, and maybe the symptoms aren't even there from the spine. So again, getting them assessed, like you said, is very, very key. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of children out there grossly misaligned, and they're having peripheral problems and this and that, and the parents mistakenly don't think it's a chiropractic issue, and that actually what it is. And the last thing you want to do is start medicating these kids when it could be something resolved pretty quick and easy.
Yeah, that's kind of my favorite moments in practice. Like you take a tiny baby and you take them as they are, whether it's a breathing issue or a inability to lay on my table, and you adjust them and you feel the clunk, whether you hear it or not, you feel a shift and you know something's happened. Like even recently, there was a little boy who's learning how to sit up. So all he wants to do is sit. He doesn't want to lay for me. But I tell you what, the minute I rocked his upper cervical in, he was laying on that table looking around like, oh, this is what life is supposed to be like. Kind of like after I get a massage and there's like a, oh, what's my name for a minute afterwards. Like it was a total calm. And like that one you spoke of, that was my 4-hour-old little tiny baby, the youngest I've ever done. Like they were having issues with the baby taking in a deep breath at 4 hours old. And I met the baby and it was like nobody should breathe like that unless you're hyperventilating, but you shouldn't be hyperventilating. So I merely distracted it and felt it go in more than I have ever in a tiny baby, because obviously something was super wrong to be making them breathe like that. And the instant it went in, his arms flew up. It was almost like, whoa, what the heck, you know? And he goes, it was insane. And like, I still get goosebumps talking to you about it, because you take a 4-hour-old baby who's breathing like this, and you don't get them checked by a chiropractor, what road are they going to be on?
Exactly.
It's not going to be the same deep breath, calm road as if they get adjusted and then they don't breathe like that anymore. So yeah, those are really cool moments.
Yeah, and that's an actual, for some of their listeners that aren't sure, that's an actual reset in their nervous system, and that's why they have that reaction. Their nervous system immediately gets communicating with the brain. And I've seen an atlas cause paralysis in arms. I've seen an atlas cause weird sensations in the head. Yesterday, I showed a mother, because I was working on her child, and she's, you know, again, I do functional medicine, and a lot of patients that see me are also having other chiropractors, and I don't mind that at all. But she was showing me, this chiropractor pointed out a neurological problem with the child, and we demonstrated that again. And I corrected his atlas, and we went over it again, and the problem was completely resolved. And she was kind of baffled that one atlas could do that. So I walked over to her and I showed her very quickly, see, your atlas is out too. This arm is real strong. If you hold this arm is real strong. To hold this one up, it goes right weak. And she, as an adult, could feel that. And I'm like, what's it doing to a kid? And when you brought up birth a moment ago, being almost like a traumatic experience, you know, that's really the watermelon through the garden hose, you know, and there's been numerous studies and graphic pictures I've seen that show when the birthing process is taking place, sometimes with C-section as well, whenever they are actually getting that baby pulling out, there's some nasty cranking going on inside that head. And I think on the neck itself to get it out. And I think very critical to have at least a competent chiropractor assess that to make sure that everything's back in place, because you could have, like you mentioned, a breathing difficulty. And if they don't get that checked, then they're going to go down the albuterol road. And that, I've seen so many people come in when they're overplaying the albuterol, and your kids get shakes and everything else. What else?
It's not natural.
It's not natural. The body doesn't like it. But again, it's about informing parents and letting them know, hey, there are safer alternative routes that should be assessed and checked, especially with the birthing of a child.
Yeah, and I mean, the few times where a baby's came in, a young baby, and I don't have to do a thing. I mean, I did an exam, here you go, your baby's great, there's no adjustment, let me know if something changes. Like, it happens. And so for a chiropractor to be able to just assess the baby to see if they need the adjustment is the important part.
Great point. Again, that really sets in the authenticity of having a cash practice. Because if you were an insurance practice, okay, I know a lot of doctors out there, but when they're running insurance, they'll adjust you whether you need it or not, just because that's what pays their bills. So having a cash doctor, you're going to get more authentic answers, and my experience with that. So, because you're going to do what's best for them because they're hiring you, again.
And it's what I would do for my child. I wouldn't adjust them unless they were subluxated and it was warranted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can't oversize that much. I always tell chiropractors, I'm training probably about half a dozen people right now on functional medicine and stuff. And I always tell chiropractors, I said, never adjust unless you know it's out, unless you know the body will reflex it or something. Never adjust. A few years back, I had an attorney come in, and I don't work on a lot of babies, but I do have a lot of children and a lot of chronic illness, a lot of adults that come in with digestive issues, etc. And this attorney came in and he said, I've been to 3 chiropractors this month. My neck is killing me right here. And I quickly checked him out and I said, well, your neck's in place. He said, I've had 3 chiropractors just whamming on this spot trying to get it to go. And I said, no, this is, I checked some of his lymphatics. They were all extremely tender. And I said, you're actually getting the start of rheumatism from an impacted bowel because of your chronic stress. This has nothing to do with a chiropractic adjustment. So again, using the right tool when it's necessary is of most importance. So speaking of which, what are some of your favorite success stories that you have, and what's your favorite one this year that you've seen?
Oh, well, I love when a mother who wasn't able to get pregnant gets adjusted and is able to pinpoint what she did that evening. And, 9 months later, there's a baby. That's pretty exciting to me. Yeah. I love when a baby sleeps all night, because you get the exhausted mother's face visit 1. And then they start sleeping 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at a time. And the mother's face is so different the second visit. Like, she's refreshed, like she's been to the spa, when really she's just had the sleep. People who aren't able to go walk around Walmart one time because it hurts so bad, follow a treatment plan and they can go zip and do whatever they want now. Like, there's just so many, but to see a big change really quickly is pretty exciting.
Awesome. So what is the best way for people to get a hold of you or reach out to you if they have any questions or anything?
My website is drkimthor.com, drkimthor.com. It'll link you to everything I got.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Kim, thank you very much for taking time today and sharing some wonderful insight for our listeners on the importance of adjusting and pediatric, how important that is to have your baby assessed right after birth. I really appreciate your expertise on this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
My pleasure. Well, you have a wonderful day, all right? And we'll keep in touch.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.